One of the things that's unique about our church is that we have a whole bunch of medical professionals and med students who attend our church. Just by show of hands, who here either works in the medical field or is attending medical school right now? It's okay, you can raise your hands. This is not, you're not going to get called on for this. Yeah, like we joke around staff, like when we're planning events and talking about safety and security and some of those things, we say, well, at least we know we'll have a doctor on hand, because somebody who's here will definitely be a doctor. And I take full advantage of this. There have been times I've called up some of you to say, hey, can you talk me and my kids through what we should expect when we go to the doctor for this little procedure? I've asked questions to doctors in the lobby, and before I know it, I'm sitting down on a stool in the lobby and getting a medical exam right in the lobby of our church. I take full advantage of this. And one of the unique things about being in a church like this is you learn to understand what it takes to become a doctor in talking to all the med students who come through here. And I thought it'd be interesting for us to have a little appreciation for what it takes to become a doctor. So I've asked one of our doctors, Dan Harlan, to come up and have a little quick conversation about what it takes to be a doctor. And you're wondering, where is this going? And you'll find out.
I'm wondering too.
Yeah. Can we get that? Is that on?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering too. So
Yeah.
let her rip.
Yeah. So you grew up in the area, and first tell us what you do, what you're like.
Yeah, so I am what's called a non-invasive cardiologist. So I take care of people with all sorts of different heart problems, and then I did some extra training, which we'll talk about, in cardiovascular imaging. So people who get ultrasounds of their hearts or CT scans or stress tests, those are the things that I read on a daily basis.
Yeah, and so you went to Carroll College, right? Grew up in the area, right?
Yep, I grew up, I'm what's called a lifer here. That's pretty rare in the medical field, especially for physicians to never leave. But I grew up in Brookfield and went to Carroll College for 4 years, and then I did my medical training here at MCW for another 4 years. After that, I did 3 years of internal medicine training, which is general medicine for adults. That was 3 years, again, at Freighter and MCW. And then I made the biggest career move and went about 10 miles across town to Aurora, where I did some 3 more years of training in cardiology. And I was not satisfied with that, so I did another year of training in cardiovascular imaging. So I had to ask my 11-year-old how many years that was, and it turns out to be 15.
15 years.
15 years.
That's a
so
long...
I got my first real job at age 35.
So Jerry Seinfeld has this little bit about what it takes to become a doctor. Have you seen this? It's from the late 90s.
Probably.
Yeah,
it.
And he's talking about how medicine works when you take medicine, and he's referring to those old transparent cutouts of people in commercials where they have the tube going down to the circle, and he describes it this way. Go ahead and play the video of what it takes to become a doctor.
TV, the commercials. That's my favorite part, where the guy says, here's the human body. It's always this guy. This guy, no face, mouth open. This is how drug companies see the public. And he's always got the tube coming down here, and then the circle area. These are the complex inner workings of the human body, I assume. I'm sure when you go to medical school, they put that up on the board the first day. Okay, everyone, now remember, you've got your tube coming down from the mouth, and that goes into your circle area. That's pretty much all we know. That's it for today. Don't miss tomorrow. We're going to practice making people wait in a little room in their underwear. And then you'll all be doctors. That's all there is to it.
That's what I thought it was, but it's not.
Yeah, pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yep.
So 15 years of training to do what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, that's really what I wanted you guys to hear from a doctor, not from me, that it took him that long. Okay, you can have a seat.
I'll be out in the back doing chest pain consults later.
But the point is, I can't fathom undergoing training that's 15 years long to do a job. And there's lots of other professions out there that have extensive training. Like if you're going to be a lawyer, right, you have to take your LSAT, you got to get a good grade on that, you got to go through all sorts of things for your law school, you got to pass a bar exam. Even if you're going to be a therapist, you got to go through, your master's program, then you have to have 3,000 hours of supervision, and then you got to take all your licensure tests. Like, all of these things take a long time, which is really good because it's really complicated. Like, taking care of somebody's heart, there's lots of nuance there. There's a lot at stake. When you're taking care of somebody's like mental health, there's a lot at stake there. So you need a lot of training. We're grateful for it, but it raises the question, when it comes to being effective in our faith, like, how much training, how much prep do we really need? Like, I went to school for 3 years to be a pastor. It wasn't quite 15, like a little shy of 15 that Dan did, but I went to school for 3 years to be a pastor, studied Greek and Hebrew, wrote hundreds of pages on topics like transubstantiation, the hypostatic union, infralapsarianism. These are big theological words that nobody uses in real life, but you study them in seminary, and it's like, oh, if I'm going to be effective in my faith, like, do I need to go into that level in depth of training? Like, is that really what we need? Like, as a church right now, we're going through, we're 1 week in to a Bible reading plan, right? And maybe you've already encountered certain things in that Bible reading plan, whether it's names or places or references to things, and you're like, I'm not quite sure I understand or know all of what that word or that phrase or that idea means. Like, how much do I need to know in order to be effective in my faith? Well, our passage today answers that question for us. We're going to be in John chapter 4, starting in verse 1, and this is what we read as we jump into the text today. It says, "Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although, in fact, it was not Jesus who had baptized, but his disciples. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee." So Jesus is on the move again. No surprise here. Jesus was a traveling preacher throughout his early days of ministry, always on the move, and we're told that if we see on this map, he was in the southern region of Israel, in Judea, and he's going back to the northern region of Israel in the area of Galilee. And then we read this in verse 4, "Now he had to go through Samaria," which might seem like, okay, yeah, that makes sense because the shortest distance between point A to point B is a straight line. Of course he went through Samaria, but that's actually unusual for Jews because if they're traveling from south to north to go back to Galilee, they would never go through Samaria. Why? Because Samaritans were enemies of the Jews, and they avoided them at all costs. Instead, Jews would go around Samaria, sometimes adding almost 90 miles to their trek home, crossing 2 different rivers in the process. So the fact that Jesus is going through Samaria is a little unusual, but also at the same time, not so much for Jesus, because he often does out-of-the-box things. And then we read this in verse 5. "So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon." I love that verse because it highlights Jesus' humanity. He got tired. He needed to sit down. He needed a break. He needed a little rest. So it's unusual that Jesus is going through Samaria to begin with. He's in this town called Sychar, sitting down by a well, and then he starts to do another unusual thing, and that is he interacts and engages with a Samaritan. Verse 7. "When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, 'Will you give me a drink?' His disciples had gone into town to buy food." So it's very unusual that he's in Samaria, even more unusual that he's speaking to a Samaritan, and the woman that he's speaking to understands this, and she even calls it out in verse 9. "The Samaritan woman said to him, 'You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?' For Jews did not associate with Samaritans." So Jesus is in a place where he's not supposed to be. Jesus is having a conversation that he's not supposed to be having. But in this conversation, we learn some things not only about Jesus, but we learn some things about this woman that Jesus is interacting with And the first thing that we learn about her is that she is relationally isolated. She's at this well by herself, which may not seem like that big of a deal, but there's a good chance she's at this well by herself because she's intentionally trying to avoid other people who might also be at this well. In the ancient world, there was no running water. If you wanted water for your home, you had to go collect that water on a daily basis. And most times in the ancient world, women would travel to the well early in the morning or late in the day because it was cooler in those times. And we're told here that this woman is at this well at what time? We're told in verse 6, at noon, which is the hottest part of the day. So she probably goes to this well at this time because she knows no one else will be there except on this day. There is one guy there, a guy by the name of Jesus. Now, not only is she relationally isolated, but she's also spiritually interested. This is what we read next. This is verse 10. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was who asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So Jesus asks her for a drink. She comments, "That's kind of weird." He then says this, and it could be that she's thinking about asking for a drink of water in literal terms. Because she goes on to say this in verse 11. "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water?" So again, she's thinking in terms of like an actual drink from this actual well, and he doesn't have anything to draw with. So, why would he have even asked her in the first place if he could do it? He obviously can't. So what is he talking about? Now, he uses the term living water, which maybe gives her some measure of indication that he's actually talking about something a little bit different than actual H2O, because she then connects this conversation to a spiritual ancestor that both she and Jesus would share. Because Samaritans and Jews actually at one point in time have the same origin. Somewhere along the way, there was a group of Jews who intermarried with another group of people and developed a new race known as the Samaritans. So the reason Jews don't like Samaritans is because they are viewed as half-breeds. They're viewed as lesser than because they're half Jewish in some way and then half something else. So they have this same connection in their spiritual lineage, and she names that in verse 12. "Are you greater than our father Jacob," who would be Jacob from the book of Genesis, "who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and livestock?" Now, Jesus makes it clear here, next, that he's actually talking about something spiritual rather than something eternal, because he says this in verse 13. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." And here this woman says in verse 15, "Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." Now, I don't know if she really understands what Jesus is saying, but she's obviously interested in this conversation. She keeps engaging in this conversation. Before the conversation's over, she will identify that at the very least, Jesus is a prophet. And as she continues in this conversation with Jesus, she has reference and knowledge of other spiritual things. So even though she's relationally isolated, she's also spiritually interested. There's something that she's aware of that's bigger than herself, this bigger being, this bigger story that she knows is out there, and she's interested in it. Now, not only is she relationally isolated and spiritually interested, but she is also emotionally injured. Because Jesus makes an abrupt turn in this conversation, and he says to her in verse 16, "Go, call your husband and come back." Now, if I'm this woman, I'm starting to wonder, who is this guy? what does he know about me, and how does he know it? And I would imagine her response back to Jesus is maybe even a little suspicious. Verse 17, I have no husband, she replied. And then Jesus said to her, you're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you have had 5 husbands, and the man that you're with now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Now, if I'm her in this moment, I'm all sorts of uncomfortable. Like, I'm thinking, do I need to bail from this conversation? Do I need to just take my water and go home and get as fast as this, get far and fast as I can away from this guy? What is going on here? Now, I think it's also important to name, though, that in this interaction with this woman, throughout church history, lots of things have been assumed about who she is and what she's done, none of which are in the text. Oftentimes, this woman is thought to be an unfaithful woman who just bounces around from one man to the next. Maybe she's a prostitute. Maybe she chases after men for her own pleasure. But none of that is stated here. In fact, Jesus says, you have had 5 husbands. So she has been married 5 times. And we don't know the details of why those relationships ended. It could be that some of them ended in death. Life expectancy in the ancient world was much less than it is today, so some of her husbands could have died. She also could have been divorced, meaning she might have been the one who was dismissed by the husband, because it was more appropriate for a man to dismiss and divorce a husband in the ancient world than it was the other way around. So maybe she was kicked out, and maybe the reason she kept looking for a husband was for security purposes, because in the ancient world, a single woman was much more likely to be taken advantage of or be threatened than somebody who was married. So she could have been going from one husband to the next for security purposes. And maybe she's with this man now who's not really her husband just because she needs to be safe. Whatever the case may be, the fact that Jesus brings this up probably indicates that he's aware that there is this place of deep brokenness and pain in her life that also is accompanied by deep longing and desire. And it probably simultaneously is a source and place of shame in her life. And it's a really good chance that's why she's at this well at noon to draw water. Because maybe she's tried going early in the day. And what she's noticed is that there's all these other women who are around. And when they see her coming towards the well, they gather together, they turn their backs towards her, they give these side-eye glances, and then they whisper to each other about who she is, the man that she's living with, why she's there. And she thought to herself, I feel bad enough as is, living this life that I'm living. I can't take it anymore as is, so why am I going to subject myself to all of these people who keep ridiculing me? I'm just going to suffer through getting water alone at the hottest part of the day. And so you could essentially say it this way, in terms of another way to summarize her life and where she's at. This woman is hiding, she's hurting, and she's in need of healing. She's hiding, she's hurting, and she's in need of healing. Essentially, that's what shame does to us. Shame forces us to hide. It forces us to run away because it's just easier and safer to make that decision myself that I'm going to remove myself from relationship. Because oftentimes the belief associated with shame is that if I keep going towards this relationship, once this person finds out who I am, then I will eventually be rejected by them. And that's the worst thing I could ever experience. So it's just easier and safer to be alone. And what she needs in this moment is she needs 3 things. 1, she actually needs to be seen. She needs to be seen. Like, she needs to know that somebody sees her. I can remember when I was probably like 10 years old. We lived in Colorado at the time. We lived in this split-level home And at the top of the stairs, we had this funny cabinet that was like built into the middle of the wall. So there wasn't like the door didn't go to the floor, just like this cabinet thing. And I remember we had a hard day around the house one day. I probably was an instigator and probably got in a little bit of trouble with my brothers. And I just went and hid in this cabinet, probably for a good 10 minutes. And at one point I noticed my mom was like walking around like, hey, have you seen Brian? Where did Brian go? And I don't remember what I did. I don't remember how it resolved. But I remember sitting in that cabinet thinking, I hope somebody comes and finds me. I'm hiding, I'm removing myself, but really what I want as this 10-year-old boy who's probably just caused some trouble and probably mom is looking for me because I'm going to get a consequence is I want somebody to see me, and the other thing I want is to be soothed in this moment. Not only does this woman need to be seen, but she also needs to be soothed because when somebody is walking in a place of shame, the last thing they need is more condemnation in their life. Like they already know. Like they already know what they're doing isn't the thing they're supposed to be doing. They already feel terrible about it, and they need somebody to soothe them. And the last thing they need is somebody to show them the way, to show them that there is another way to live. And this is how this conversation between Jesus and this woman goes. Verse 19, she says, Sir, I can see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Now, it seems like maybe she's leaning into this because she sees that Jesus is a prophet. Some commentators speculate maybe she's trying to avoid. Jesus has just put his finger on the most painful place of her life. She's like, I don't want to talk about that. Let's just talk about where you're supposed to go to church. Can we talk about that instead? So it's hard to know really, is she leaning in or she's avoiding? But then Jesus says this, verse 21, Woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. Now, every time I read that, I feel like Jesus is intentionally overloading her with information, right? Like there's all kinds of info and theology. He's talking about worship, the appropriate nature of worship. He's talking about spirit things. He's talking about truth. It's like, what in the world is Jesus doing? And I've always wondered, maybe he's intentionally heaping all of this theological talk on her to put her in a place where she responds the exact way that she responds. Because she says, oh, I don't know that, but the Messiah called the Christ is coming. And when he comes, he will explain everything to us. He leads her to this place where he exactly wants her to be because he knows that in this moment he has her, and what he says to her is, I, the one speaking to you, the one who will explain everything to you, the one who will show you the way, the one who sees you in your deepest moment of pain, the one who has the ability to soothe you and heal you, the one that you are waiting for, I am he. And I always imagine, like, if she's like in mid-draw of water, right? She just drops like whatever she's doing and drawing with, and she just is struck because she realizes, I'm with this man. Jesus is the one that she needs. Jesus is the one that you need. And here's what I wonder this morning. I wonder if you think about her situation, being hurting, hiding, in need of healing, somebody who is relationally isolated, spiritually interested, but yet also emotionally injured. Like, what of that resonates with you? What of that is also true of you? Where are you carrying shame and you're scared to death to be seen in your shame? Like, this woman has come to realize that the person who can move me forward in life is standing right in front of me. And it's the same message. It's the same reality. It's the same person that we all need today. It's Jesus. Jesus is the one who sees you right where you are. Jesus is the one who can soothe your concern, your worry, your anxiety, your fear, your pain. And he is the one who can and will show you the way. A handful of years ago, I was speaking at a youth camp up in northern Wisconsin, and every day at this camp, they had a moment where they had a leaders meeting kind of right before dinner time, and it was a way to recap the day, talk about what the kids were learning, talk about a few logistic details for the evening. And as a speaker, I would sit in on these meetings, and there was one leader, because every day they're like, hey, what are you hearing from your kids? What are you experiencing from your kids? And one leader said, one thing that's happening in our kids' lives is incredible. One in particular, she said, last year we were at this camp, and this student was here, and she sat in the worship center during like kind of the final night, which is the response night, where there's a gospel presentation and kids can respond to the gospel. And she was mad at the world because things at home weren't well. Her family was breaking down, and she was furious at God. And everybody knew it, everybody experienced it, everybody felt her anger and her rage. It was spilling out to everybody. And then here we are, a year later, and last night which was also response night, she was sitting in the same chair that she was the year before, happened to be in the exact same row she was the year before, but she had this radically different perspective. Because in that session, Jesus was able to reveal to her, in the same way that he's revealing to this Samaritan woman, that I'm the one you need. I'm the one who's here for you. It doesn't matter about your circumstances. Your circumstances haven't changed, but I am with you in them, and with me, everything is going to be okay. And the leader was like, she is night and day, drastically different person than who she was when she showed up this week. And I guarantee you she's leaving, going to go home, and everybody's going to notice that something in her life has changed. It's not her circumstances, but it's her because of what Jesus has done in her. And what happens in this moment for this woman is that exact same thing. She sees and understands, this is the guy I've been waiting for. This is the guy I've been longing for. Jesus reveals himself to this woman, and everything starts to change. The first thing is her sense of identity. The disciples were told, return. And they see this interaction between Jesus and this woman, and they think to themselves, that's kind of weird. Why is he talking to her? But they don't say anything. But then we read in verse 28, then leaving her water jar, the disciples come back, and then she, who is there to draw water, leaves her water jar behind, which might seem as though maybe she's being a little forgetful, right? Like maybe she forgot. She's just like absent-minded. But in this story, this water jar becomes a symbol of why she's there at noon. It becomes a symbol of her shame. And what shame does is shame tells a story that oftentimes shapes your identity. Shame becomes this voice in your life that shapes your story and shapes your identity. Years ago, I was doing a funeral. It was here in our building. And when you do a funeral, you just naturally meet all of this extended family from the person who had passed away. And I was down in the lower level, just kind of walking through. There was somebody coming in out of the bathroom downstairs, and there weren't that many people, so it was pretty safe to say everybody who was here at that point, I mean, the funeral was still a couple hours away, it was probably a family member. And so I just introduced myself to this individual. I said, hey, are you part of the family? And they're like, yeah, my name is so-and-so. They probably told you about me. And I was like, oh, no, I haven't heard your name yet. Who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm the black sheep of the family. And I thought to myself, here's a guy who I've never met before. I've never heard his name before. And the way he introduces himself to me is that he's the screw-up of the family. Like, what happened in his life? What was said to him? What was the narrative that he created? And what shame is there that's keeping that identity in play? Shame becomes a story that oftentimes shapes our identity. And by this woman leaving her water jar behind, she's letting go of this old identity and eager to move towards something new. The other thing that's changing in her life is her sense of security. Why? Because when she leaves this water jar behind and when she leaves the well, where does she go? We're told in verse 28. Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town. She's going towards the very people she's trying to avoid. She's always had this issue. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to see them. I don't want to interact with them because I'm ashamed of who I am. But now she's moving back towards them. And what we see is that for her, her sense of community also changes. Because it's one thing to live around community. It's another thing to be a part of community. And for the longest time, she was living around community, but living an isolated life. And now she's going to the community, and she starts to speak to them. We're told this, again, carrying on in verse 28. She went back to the town and said to the people, like she's now willing to go talk to them and initiate the conversation. Verse 29, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? Not only is her identity changing, her sense of security, her engagement in community, but now she's bold with her story. These are all the things I've done. And you know all of them. I know all of them. We all know that everybody knows. We just don't talk about it. But now we're going to talk about it because this guy is changing everything in my life. Come meet this man who told me everything that I ever did, who saw me in my shame, who's soothing me in my pain, and who's showing me the way to new life. Do you want to meet this guy? Because he's right outside our town, hanging out by the well. And then, verse 30, they came out of the town and made their way towards him. I mean, the flow of this part of the story, then as the disciples show up, this guy leaves. She goes back into the town, tells everybody what has happened, and then they come out to see her, and then we jump ahead to verse 39. This is the point. Many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. I mean, this is one of the all-time best stories in the scriptures because it captures who Jesus is and what he can do in your life and how he can completely change and transform you and send you out to be a spiritual force in the world. So at the beginning, we asked the question, what does it take to be effective in your faith? Does it take 15 years of training? Does it take 3 years of training? No. It only takes one thing, your story. The one thing you need to be effective in your faith is your story. Your story is all you need. Because that's what it says in verse, the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of this woman's testimony. Like instantly, they believe because of her story. Your story is all you need. You don't need an advanced degree. You don't need years and years of church attendance. You don't need to have read the Bible from cover to cover. All you need is the story of how Jesus is daily engaging with you and changing your life. I mean, think about what it is this woman knows. She seems to have some spiritual interest. She seems to have some spiritual awareness. She also has some confusion in her life because near the end of that conversation with Jesus, she's like, Jesus, I don't really know what you're talking about, but one day it'll all make sense. She doesn't know everything. If you were here last week, think about the guy we talked about last week in Mark 5, the guy who's possessed by demons running around the caves at night with no clothes on, trying to just scare everybody away. Like, Jesus heals him. This guy says to Jesus, can I go with you? Jesus says, no. Go back to your town and tell them what the Lord has done for you. Like, that guy probably knows even less than what this woman knows. And Jesus sends him out right away. He doesn't say, hey, come follow me for a year or two and then you'll know enough. No, go tell people what the Lord has done for you. All you need is your story. Your story is the one thing you need to be effective in making an impact in the world for the kingdom. When I was in seminary, when I was getting my advanced degree, when I was going through my 3 years of training, one class that I took was evangelism and discipleship. It was a great class. It was a really challenging class, not so much because of the content, but because we actually had to go out into the community and share our faith. Our main assignment for the semester was to have 10 spiritual conversations sharing the gospel with somebody, and you had to write up a report on it, and then you got graded, not so much if they became a Christian or not, but if you did it. Like, it was like you'd get an A if you did the assignment. It was like, as we were in this season of like intense academic study, it was this breath of fresh air and terrifying at the same time to actually go out into the world and say, do I really believe this? And can I actually share this with strangers? So we used to go to this community college that was probably about 20 minutes, and you just kind of walk through the campus and talk to people. And I did this both as a student and then the next year later kind of as like a TA in the class. I had 20 different conversations with people in those years, and I was terrible at sharing my faith. As I reflect back on it, because as a MDiv student, what I wanted to do was convince people that I was right. I wanted to prove to them how much I knew, and I wanted to, at times, even intimidate them with my knowledge. Like, knowing what I know now, 20 years later, I wish I could go back and do one thing. Ask them their story, and then ask them if I can tell them mine. About what God has done in my life. How he's continually provided everything I need. One of the things that I regularly struggle with is like, is there going to be enough in life, right? One of the other things I struggle with is, are people going to like me and accept me? And I can tell you story after story after story of how God has given me everything I need and more. I can tell you story after story after story of all the ways God has said, Brian, I love you even when other people don't, and that's okay. Not everybody has to like you, because what I offer you is more than what anybody could ever give you. When I embrace my story and share it with other people, all of a sudden it starts to break down the walls. Like, we don't have to argue. It's just getting to know each other and building relationship. And what we see is that's the thing that Jesus is inviting people into, is relationship. And when you invite other people into relationship with you, you're also inviting them to relationship with Jesus, because he is with you. And he's saying, come be with me. So what do you need to be effective? One, it's just your story. Specifically, your story about what Jesus has done and is doing in your life. And when you get bold enough to share that, people in your life will be curious to know more about why you believe what you believe. And I love what Jesus says to the disciples in the middle of this section that we skipped. We kind of skipped over verse 31 through 38. Jesus is having this cryptic conversation with them. The woman has left. She's back in the town. People are starting to now come out and see Jesus. And he says to them in verse 35, this is Jesus talking to the disciples, I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for the harvest. Essentially what Jesus is saying is opportunity is all around you all the time. The question is, are you going to engage in it? Are you going to engage with Jesus? Allow him to see you, to soothe you, and show you the way, and then go out into the world and share your story, because your story is the only thing you need. Lord, we're thankful that you are a God who continues to pursue us. We're grateful that you continue to come after us, even when we try and hide, even when we try and deny, even when we try and skirt around coming back to you. You come for us. And so, Lord, I pray that you would give us eyes to see, that you would give us a willingness to open up our life to you and to the people around us, that we would be eager to share our story of who you are and what you've done in our lives, so that the world may know that you are the one who will show them the way. Amen.